Hollywood. It's Halloween.
Good evening. I'm Eddie Spuhghetti, Betamax enthusiast, Hollywood so-and-so, and casual Batman fan. And today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the upcoming 2 Batmen films that are coming out next year, with The Batman in the early spring and The Flash in the late fall. New trailers were released really recently for these 2 movies, and I did watch them over, and there's something still kind of iffy about them that's not making me 100% sold on them, and I kind of want to talk about why. Now, to give you a little bit of a short history in regards to the relationship with myself and the Caped Crusader, I've always been a fairly big Batman fan. I think out of all the superheroes in the comic world and cinematic world especially, I've always geared towards Batman quite a bit, especially with the Keaton incarnation, as that was the Batman that I primarily grew up with in the 90s. I had like a top tier of different superheroes, and to give you a full sense of what kind of kid I was, Batman Keaton primarily was top tier, but he also kind of shared that with animated series Batman, Kevin Conroy voiced. But then there was the Rocketeer, and then there was Darkman. I was that kid. And I mean, I love them. I always thought that like they were all really unique and cool in their own ways. But I kind of gravitated sometimes a little bit more towards the Rocketeer stuff because I thought it was really fun to fly, and I liked all the Art Deco-iness to it. I also liked the Art Deco-iness to Batman the Animated Series, so, you know, that helps. And also, I liked the dark elements of Batman and Darkman especially, because they reminded me a little bit of Universal Monsters, which is what they were primarily trying to give an ode to, an inspiration, if you will. Also, there was Adam West, which I think honestly, out of every single like decade since when the show came out, Batman the series in the 60s, I think honestly every decade has had a new sprout of kids who just adore the fuck out of that show. And I honestly think it's one of the few shows in television history that is able to be appreciated and enjoyed by almost any age group or demographic or anything. I think honestly people can watch that and find a cheesiness and a warmth in it and a simplicity to a degree. That's also just kind of like, you know, this is easy to digest. There's nothing like super complicated here. Like, I don't think they ever did an episode about like the fucking Cold War or anything like that, as far as I know. Like, I think they had a couple characters who were Russian, especially in the movie. I'm pretty sure Catwoman's fake persona was a Russian lady, but that's maybe the closest. Maybe the movie is the only closest they ever got to actually doing something like legit. I had action figures. I had a Keaton pillowcase. I still have it. Batman Returns. I had soup, different kinds of soup. I had different kinds of cookies. I had different kinds of cereal, or at least like different kinds of like, you know, the cereal, like the Kellogg's cornflakes that had like Kilmer's face all over it, even though there was nothing special about the cornflakes themselves. It was just like you know, Batman cornflake stuff. And I don't know, I would cut out the guys out of the boxes and shit. So it was like, oh yeah, I got this image of Batman in cardboard form. The McDonald's Happy Meals for Batman Returns, fucking amazing. Had most of those toys. Pajamas, had pajamas of Batman Returns. It's probably about a little bit over like a year or so more after that movie came out that I was actually able to like get stuff from it and actually appreciate it. Because I think in 92 I would have been like, I don't know, 4. I think I was like 4, so I was a little too young to be able to be watching that sort of stuff, even though I'm pretty sure I saw the first film. Maybe. I don't know. I'm pretty sure I did. I remember thinking it was creepy. And besides like videotapes and TV with the Batman Adam West series, I eventually did get to go see one of the movies in the theater. I got to see Batman Forever during a really hot summer, I think it was. I was gone summer vacationing in New Brunswick, and we took a little bit of time out of one afternoon to go see a showing of Batman Forever in a dark cinema. And I've thoroughly loved it. It was weird because looking back at it now, I never really questioned why Batman looked different in it. Like it was a different guy. It wasn't Keaton. And I don't know why, but it never really like clicked for me, or it wasn't really something that I noticed and just like bothered me through the movie, or it was like, this is a different guy. For some reason, I just accepted that. And partially, maybe that's thanks to the Adam West show, where I was able to see a different form of Batman. The coolest moment that I have of watching Batman Forever in the cinema was totally that there was this one point where Robin and Batman are trying to scale like this island that the Riddler has created, or something, grown, I don't know, built, and they're trying to scale it, and Robin kicks part of the rock and realizes that it's like tin or it's hollow, and he's like, holy metal, Batman. And then Batman's kind of doing his own thing. He's like, what? And then Robin's like, holy, full of holes. And like my dad thought it was hilarious. Like he fucking laughed out loud kind of thing, but he was the only person in that cinema. And there, granted, there weren't very many people in the cinema, but he was the only person in it who just fucking laughed out loud like crazy after that. And I remember turning to him and being like, what's so funny about that? And he's like, oh, it's a reference to the 60s show, like holy this. And I'm like, oh yeah. That is funny. Now, the other thing you need to know about me is that I have a weird type of system regarding how I watch media. If it's something that I'm not 100% invested or interested in whatsoever, I will basically start to look at the run times for these things, and I'll start to decide whether or not I want to spend that amount of time devoted just to watching this movie, or if I want to be doing something else that's more important. Yes, I'm a psychopath. I don't know. It's just like, sometimes it's hard to be like, there's one part of this that I'm interested, and that's part of the reason that I'm bringing this up today. But then it's like, yeah, I still want to see what happens or whatever. And there's some movies where it's like Beverly Hills Cop 4, like I will go see the entirety of that first day. Like that's the one of those things, one of those like 5 movies that I've been like, yeah, totally. Beverly Hills Cop 4. So taking those two things into consideration, I think really the reason that I'm not super sold yet is because also that we've had so many different incarnations of this character, especially in cinema, that we will automatically start to compare them, especially to the newer content that's coming out. And this is a thing that happens fairly often when it comes to a pre-established franchise, or even, a rebooting of a beloved franchise, just something like pop culture heavy, especially a character of Batman, who's like one of the most endearing and well-known superheroes in cinema's history. But the thing is that we start to automatically compare everything, especially because Chris Nolan's The Dark Knight series, or Batman Begins series, or whatever you want to call it, set the bar so fucking high that it's like sometimes it doesn't even matter what it is. Like if they honestly cloned Adam West and brought him back into a Batman movie, nobody will give a shit. They'd just be like, is it as good as The Dark Knight? And I mean, that sucks. Like I feel bad for those movies, but those fucking Dark Knight movies were really good. Especially the second one. Also, the other problem with The Flash and the Batman so far is that the trailers haven't really appeared to kind of present, or at least represent, what these films are kind of more like tonally wise. And it's funny because the Batman one seems a lot more better at that. But it a little bit contradicts what I've read about what this movie's supposed to be like, which it's supposed to be more of a horror, neo-noir kind of detective film, from what I've at least read about it. It kind of supposed to verge more into a horror film kind of element almost. But what I've seen in the new trailer that came out feels a lot more glitz and glamour, feels a lot more like, let's have shit blow up, car chases, etc. And that wasn't really something I was kind of like expecting to see in this type of movie. Whereas the Flash trailer, I mean, it's interesting what they've given us so far, which is very, very minimal. We only get like a certain visual or audible cue, at the very beginning of the trailer to Danny Elfman's score from the 1989 original. But then otherwise, we get some kind of back glimpse shots and various kind of out of focus things in the background. And very obviously that the lead character is in Keaton's Batcave. But again, we don't really get a whole lot, enough, or at least enough for a teaser trailer. And I know it was I don't know, also the way it was edited was really strange. The way it was edited was like I don't know, there was parts of it that didn't make sense, and I felt like I was watching one of those recaps at the beginning of a trailer. But thinking over the trailers and thinking about what I've read about these movies so far and heard about them, there are a couple things about them that actually I am interested in seeing, and I am interested enough to potentially devote that precious amount of my free time into watching them. For The Flash, it's basically Keaton. Now, I'm not super invested nor knowledgeable in the recent DC Universe cinematic franchise, or whatever you want to call it, cinema world of DC heroes, but I've seen a little bit, and I don't know, it was just, that's a tough one, you know? It's just like, it just didn't hit all the right notes for me so far, like from what I've seen of the films. I didn't watch all of them, but I remember I watched, I think I must at least watch 5 minutes of Justice League, and I was like, I can't do it. Like, there's something here that's missing. There's something here it's not hitting with me. It's not the way that I want to see these characters kind of be done. There's a little bit, I don't know, it's not working. However, with The Flash, we have the opportunity to bring back a version of a character of Batman that it possibly might be the number one version in a way of pop culture rules. Like, I don't know, it's hard. It's really a toss-up between Adam West and Keaton, but I feel like at this point in time, Keaton has had such an impact on a large amount of people's childhoods that it's now like Adam West has kind of become the number two to a degree. I don't know. It's weird to think about in that way. But I'm just honestly really excited to see what he does with this movie, because obviously the portrayal that he, gave us of Batman Bruce Wayne in Batman and Batman Returns. I say Batman too many times. Batman. Basically, his portrayal in those movies were only limited to what he had in the scripts, which honestly, in a lot of places, they're not super, super great. I would say more the first Batman movie is a little bit better script-wise than the second one, but that's just personal opinion. I'm not saying that the second one is better than the first one, because the second one, pop culture-wise, I think at this point in time is starting to overcome the first one, believe it or not. But I mean, you never know. Maybe the script for this Flash movie might actually be a lot more better for Keaton as Batman and give him a lot more to work with. And I think that's great. I think that's a really cool way of, being able to see maybe a different version of this character. Because honestly, for me, when I watch those movies back, I mean, he's interesting, but there's a lot of spaces where he's wooden. And I honestly don't think it's because of Keaton. I think it's really just the script. And per some of the rumors that I've been hearing here and there on the internet, apparently he's kind of being eyed as being the Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man for the DC Universe moving forward, which I think honestly is a great idea. Like, sure, let's try to build a fucking universe around Keaton's Batman. Why not? It would be really neat to see other versions of villains who we would have seen had we had more of the Tim Burton Batman movies. And that's really fascinating. Let's world build on that a little bit. Hell, we got those new comics out recently. Those things look amazing. Yeah, there's a lot more meat on that bone. On the subject of bones, when it comes to the Batman with Robert Pattinson in the role for the first time, bones equals dead people. Dead people equals being killed by something. Batman's gonna fight a serial killer in the movie. No, so the reason why this is interesting with the serial killer aspect is because it's not really common in the world of Batman. I think the most famous one has honestly been Calendar Man, as far as I can tell. And I'm not really a huge comic fan, or at least have that amount of knowledge as some other people do. I think honestly that mixing it with a serial killer is a great idea to kind of add a different kind of approach of realism to the Batman film. We saw what we saw with Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight series, whatever it's called. I think it's called Dark Knight series. I don't know. I keep thinking it's Batman Begins series, but that doesn't sound right. The other interesting part of it being a serial killer as the lead villain, or as far as we know, is that usually those villains tend to go after larger groups of people, not individuals. So it's neat to see somebody who's not necessarily going after like the entire city of Gotham, as far as we know, based on what we could see in the trailers. We have seen Batman, though, interact with serial killers in more literary instances. just like Gotham by Gaslight, which was a very popular graphic novel, I believe. It was not a comic series. I think it was a graphic novel in the late 80s, which involved a turn of the century Batman coming across Jack the Ripper, I believe. I've actually never read it. I've always heard great things about it, though, and it looks very interesting. So I think one day, I'll devote some of that time to reading it. And the other one that was actually really fascinating for me is this wonderful short story called Subway Jack in a book, an anthology book called The Further Adventures of Batman, which I highly, highly recommend if you're a Batman fan. A lot of wonderful short stories in here, all kinds of stuff. There's a really cool one even about the seamstress who does all the costumes for all the villains and the heroes, and it's kind of told through their perspective and how they view different people in the hero and villain world of DC Universe. It's really fascinating. I won't spoil too much about that story, but Subway Jack is basically about Batman going up against a serial killer who's killing off some of the homeless population in Gotham, but there's a little bit of an interesting supernatural element to this story that kind of makes it a little more unique than just Batman going after a serial killer. And that was also surprisingly interesting too. Like, it was just kind of, I've never really, thought to read or conjure up a storyline about Batman involving the supernatural to a degree, but also especially a serial killer. Now, it's still very early, and we're going to be seeing a lot more merchandising and trailers coming out for these two movies in the time to come before they're released. Frankly, I'm really excited to see some cardboard standees of Keaton in the Batman suit. I mean, you're going to be able to buy a brand new Keaton Batman figure, not a throwback thing, not a reissue or, a molding or, a different design of him in the other two films. This is like going to be specifically for this new movie. I'm thinking we're going to see a couple of different suits. We have to have a couple different suits. I think it would only be appropriate if there were a couple different suits. But yeah, it's going to be cool. And, at least that sort of stuff I am totally excited for. But there's still a little part of it that I'm like, I'm not super sold yet. I think maybe we'll find out more in the time to come. So I think I'll leave it at that about these two movies for now. I'm just cautiously interested in possibly watching both of them for a bunch of different reasons, but I'm still kind of a little bit on the shifty side about where I stand on that. Would these become movies that I might contemplate looking at the runtimes? I don't know. So I tell you what, why don't you tell me what you think of these two movies coming out? Do you think you agree with me a little bit on the fact that, you're not super hot for them, but you're kind of like, lukewarm at some point, warm, if you feel like that, comment in the comment section below. Let me know what you think, and I'll check back with you soon. Have a good one.